Water has been called the mother and matrix of all life. My hero and biologist naturalist David Attenborough opens a documentary on fresh water with the narration, and he says this: only 3% of the water on our planet is fresh, yet these precious waters are rich with surprise. All life on land is ultimately dependent on fresh water. In one part of the documentary, he notes, "This is the end of the river's journey. Collectively, they've worn down mountains, carried them to the sea, and all along the way, their fresh water has brought life in abundance to planet Earth." Water is life. Then, of course, there are the wonderful water bears or tardigrades. Is everybody familiar with those? Anybody? They are the coolest little things. Water bears were discovered about 200 years ago, but they're over 600 million years. They've been around a long time. They are microscopic, less than 1 millimeter in size. They have 8 stubby little legs, and a little tiny claw on the end of them. That's why they call them water bears. And they can be found in oceans, rivers, seas, and lakes, and wetlands. They survive in temperatures as low as minus 328 degrees and as high as 304 degrees Fahrenheit. And here's the interesting thing, though. When dry conditions arrive, instead of dying, they survive by drying up almost completely. They turn into like a little speck of dust. And then, with only a drop of water, the sleeping bear wakes up. It revives. They found a little water bear in a museum. It was 100 years old. And they put a little water and it immediately revived. It's amazing. Water empowers life. When David and I purchased our current house a little over 5 years ago, we were told that the previous owners had gone through a bitter divorce. And after moving in, we could see signs of their anger, broken things, an indent in a wall where a door had obviously been slammed several times. The yard had clearly not been cared for. And in the backyard, we were particularly concerned with a languishing maple tree. It had a prominent dead limb emerging right out of the middle, like a cry for help. It had some living branches too, but even the leaves looked dry and worn out. The trunk looked like it had been gashed in places, and the bark was raised and split. We wondered if there was any hope for the tree. We were advised, however, it might be able to recover. The remedy? Water. And David gave us some serious pruning. I mean, a serious haircut. That limb came down. It looked like a little floppy. It did not look like a regular maple tree. I thought that might do it in. But eventually, after a couple of years, the trees seemed to have renewed life, a healthy vibrancy. The leaves lost all their brown edges, all because of a little attention and regular watering. The trunk of the tree still has its scarring, but the tree hasn't stopped reaching up and outward, embracing the sun and the rain and the nighttime stars. Over the years, I've preached on the sacred nature of water, but every time there's something new and miraculous to discover. Water is life in both literal and a spiritual sense. And it's not surprising that water became a symbol for God and God's presence, God's renewing power. Alec Bartholomew wrote a book called The Spiritual Life of Water. And he beautifully writes of the physical, chemical, and spiritual qualities just embedded and a part of water. He writes, "Water carries all life, but is beyond time, for it bears in its flow the seed of future life, as well as the memory of past life." He says we have lost touch with the magic of water, the freshness of natural spring, reflections in a mountain lake, the mystery of a sacred well. He says water mediates between life and death, between being and non-being, between health and sickness. There is no life anywhere, my friends, without water. At its most basic, water is a molecule. It's very simple. With one oxygen atom and two hydrogen atoms bonded together by shared electrons. It's V-shaped with an angle of 105 degrees. And water molecules are naturally attracted to and stick to each other because of this polarity, forming a hydrogen bond. Water is the only inorganic liquid that occurs naturally on Earth. Water is also the only substance that occurs as both a solid, I'm sure kids learn this in their early science classes, as solid ice, as liquid, and a gas. Now, some people say there's a fourth property, which is mist. And scientists searching for life on other planets regard water as the first and fundamental requirement for life. Unless you're reading some science fiction books. I read a lot of science fiction, and then sometimes you don't need water, but generally speaking, you need water. Without water, there can be no life as we know it. Most religious traditions, if not all, use water as part of their sacred ceremonies: purification, renewal, rebirth. Our own religious tradition is replete with references to water as core to our being. And so I'm going to move forward in the service, and we're going to invite you to participate in a ritual. And there is so much around us and in the world that will scorch us, anger us, terrify us, break our hearts, and dry us out. And the earth herself is suffering in so many ways. And yet at the same time, it is so important that we not become distant or calloused, that we ignore the cries of the world. And it is in keeping ourselves close to God's living water that we also become people who can offer living water.